So I had originally planned to make this like next week because I'm a little tired today from a hike, but I thought might as well do it while the ideas are still fresh in my mind, while the concepts are still fresh in my mind. And so a lot of what I'm going to say is going to overlap with what I said in the acceptance of impermanence video and what I said previously in the vastness of space video. I think I ended up calling it the enormity of the universe. Kind of fits. And so this one is about time. And just to like start it off so that you know where I'm going with this. So in much the same vein as, our smallness being comparable to an atom in comparison to the Earth, our size compared to the vastness of the universe is minuscule to the point of virtually non-existence. I mean, not non-existence, but we're so tiny that we're essentially inconsequential to the goings-on of the rest of the universe. The universe will take on without us. We're not influential enough. We're not influential enough on a space that big to have that much of an impact. It sounds kind of sad, but I mean it's essentially the truth. We're too tiny to affect the rest of the universe in a very impactful way. It just kind of goes to show you how tiny we are. And on top of us being, teeny tiny little beings, we're also very short-lived living beings. I mean, there are organisms on Earth that can live for 1,000 years if you include, trees, which are essentially clones of each other, all connected via a network of roots that have existed for thousands, or probably over 1,000 years. I'm trying to forget wow. I'm trying to remember the name of the organism. I think it's called Pando. It might be over 1,000 years, well over 1,000 years. I'm just not remembering how old it is. Then you also have trees, solitary trees that can reach hundreds of years, nearly 1,000 in many cases. You have turtles that can live for over 100 years. But that's much shorter a lifespan than the thousands of years that trees and tree clones can live for. Then you have us. And then you have beings like us that can barely reach 100 years, with only a few notable exceptions of persons reaching over 100 years. I think the oldest a person has ever gotten to may be under 130. Either way, when you compare that to the over 13 billion year history of the universe, on top of being teeny tiny specks for life, we're also incredibly short-lived. Our lifespans are many orders of magnitude shorter than the lifespan of the universe up until this point. We're a blip. If we were put on a clock that represented the time elapsed in the universe, we're barely even a microsecond, if that. We, like I said in my acceptance of impermanence video, our lives are the briefest of moments. To us, it seems incredibly long, I mean, especially to a person who's younger. To me, my 20-something odd years of living feel long compared to someone who has lived for 80 years. For them, each passing year feels like it passes faster than the last. And the way I've heard it sort of explained is that you know, a year for me represents a larger fraction of my life than a year for a person who's 80. You know, for me, it's one out over like 20. I don't want to give away my age, but for me, let's assume I was 20. For me, it's 1 in 20. For a person who's 80, it's 1 in 80. So it's a much smaller fraction of their lives. And so for them, it feels like it moves along a lot quicker because compared to the rest of their lives, it's barely anything. Not barely anything, but it's a lot shorter. It's noticeable for a person who's reached that age. But then you look at that in comparison to a being that can live for over 1,000 years, and even an 80-year lifespan seems minuscule. And then move that to 10,000, 100,000, million, billion, and you see just how small a fraction our lives take up in comparison to the total amount of years that have passed since the beginning of the universe. We barely even register. Even though to us, our entire lives, you know, how do I say it? It's the course of a human being's entire life. You're in all the time that you know, all the time that you've ever experienced is encompassed in your lifespan, sort of by definition. But even though that to us seems like a long time, it really isn't in the grand scheme of things. Our lives are so quick. On top of being these tiny little beings in a universe that dwarfs us in ways that we can't even comprehend, but it also outlives us, or has outlived any living thing by also an insane amount as well, by orders and orders of magnitude, even just considering the lifespan that it's reached so far. Like the development of life in human beings for the universe may just be sort of a quick sort of instant of something changing for a brief period of time, until eventually the universe becomes such that life is no longer supportable, and there goes the era in which life was possible. But for me, I imagine that sort of era in time would be short-lived in comparison to the age of the universe. And you think about it in terms of even the existence of human beings, and comparing like one's own lifespan to the entire history of human beings on Earth, and already our lives seem pretty short and instantaneous compared to even the history of civilization. But then you keep sort of zooming out further and further and further, and it seems even more like our lives are essentially an instant. I mean, in geological timescales, we're only here for the briefest of moments. On universal and galactic timescales, where we barely even register, and then on the scale of the entire universe, we're gone in what probably seems like, to a universal being, like maybe a god who can see the whole of the universe and the whole of time. We're probably there for so quick, and you'll miss it, sort of an instant, barely even noticeable. And then you think about it in terms of the potential future of the universe that could reach scales which dwarf this universe's current age by many orders of magnitude. In which case we become even more like instantaneous blips. And this number has come up a lot, I've realized, but after a Google years and every black hole has essentially evaporated, after a Google years, can you imagine looking for us in that sort of timeline of existence of the universe, where we would be on that timeline? I mean, if this is a Google years, and we're somewhere on that timeline, we're probably near to about here, and then everything else right, I guess to the left of this little point is the existence of the universe up until our present day, and then with the Google years, you have all the rest of this time to go. So, which means it kind of goes without saying, but we would be part of the universe's sort of ancient history, but only because there's the potential for the universe to exist for so much time beyond, our own lifespan, or even the lifespan of humanity or civilization in its totality. And that vast expanse of time is inconceivably huge. We don't live in terms of those time scales. We can barely even contemplate it because it's so much larger than what we experience. It's the same thing with the size of the universe. It's bigger than what we can really imagine because it's not a sort of scale, a size scale that we're used to working with. It's a scale that dwarfs us in ways that we can barely even wrap our head around. So then you think about it in terms of like just immense time, and again, it's hard to wrap your head around it. The universe seems infinite to us. The universe seems eternal to us because when you start thinking about it in those enormous terms, it kind of seems that way to us, human beings who are, at most a meter tall and can live for nearly 130 years at most. We're quick, tiny blips in the grand tale of the universe. And then, there's that sort of crazy little factoid about the fact that, even given how old the universe is already, red dwarf stars that I mentioned in the previous video are only in their infancy now, and will only die far into the future. Those stars will burn for so long because they burn through their helium and hydrogen so slowly that they'll probably far outlast life, us, hell, our entire solar system, entire galaxies. They would be the last remaining stars within the galaxies, but that's sort of saying something, that these stars can exist for so long that they mark the potential end of stellar light within within the galactic sort of collection of stars. And then you have black holes, which because of how inefficient Hawking radiation is at diminishing a black hole, black holes taking a Google years to eventually evaporate, the largest ones I would imagine, which would then mark the end of existence, I guess. So unless you count also black dwarf stars that have quantum tunneled into balls of iron, but then if photons eventually decay, those will disintegrate too, and you'll be left with an infinite nothingness, the void. To go back to some of my first videos on this little channel of mine. And then the void would exist for eternity, which by definition is a timescale so large it cannot be comprehended because it has no end, which just is kind of mind-blowing in and of itself. And these are sadly for us, we who love to witness amazing events, we'll never get to see any of this. We'll be long gone by then. This sort of kind of touches on a video that I might make in the future about death, but there's over 13 billion years of universal existence that we are not privy to. like I wasn't alive during the age in which Hitler was alive, but that's not really something that you can lament. Or I wasn't alive when, I mean, how do I say it? It's not a privilege to have lived during the time of Hitler, because you saw essentially a lot of heartache and bloodshed, so it's probably not the best example to use, but there are historical events, to put it better, that I wasn't alive to see. You know, the first moon landing, the speeches of Martin Luther King. I'm not alive to either see them in person or see them on television as they were happening. I wasn't alive to see any of that. But I also wasn't alive to see the vast history of the universe up until this point. And I won't be around to see the immense universes, the immense history of the universe that is yet to come. Because my life is short as a human being. It's a blip. It's in terms of in terms of something that's occurring in the universe. It's an instant. Which is funny, because the universe, it can be shaped by occurrences which happen in the time scale of what is essentially an instant. The universe coming into being, particles coming in and out of existence. There are occurrences, there are natural phenomena which I believe you could sort of describe as happening instantaneously, which is interesting because, you know, those still exist. Those are still a thing those are still things that are happening in the universe. But when you put them place them on this sort of universal time scale that encompasses all time within the universe, I mean, I guess it sort of maps sort of well to the analogy I made in the previous video about, you know, what is the universe's size to an atom when the universe is enormous to a human? What is the length of time of the universe to, like, a literal instant compared to the life of a human being, when we're looking at the universe as something that is so old we can't even comprehend it? So it's just sort of this sort of way that you can scale up from the minuscule, an atom compared to a human being compared to the universe, a literal instant in time compared to the life of a human being compared to the immense possible age of the universe somewhere in the future. It's amazing. I'm trying not to make this video too long, which is kind of funny considering it's a video about time, but I don't know, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to just the enormity of time. We can barely even comprehend that much time. And it's also what contributes to the idea that the universe can allow situations which may be improbable to happen in such a way that it becomes inevitable, because essentially you're dealing with so much time, matter, and space in which that matter can order itself into different configurations, that even improbable states of matter or combinations of matter become inevitable. And in a universe that has potentially a googly years in which it can exist with over 90 million light years to work with who knows how much collective matter within it, there's a lot you can do. It's It's like, it's the biggest sandbox you could ever imagine. It is the biggest sandbox you could ever imagine. And we can't even conceive of what would exist that far out into the future, because it's so far beyond our ability to even contemplate. You know, what configuration would the universe take after 50 trillion years? Just think about that. What would the Earth look like after that time? Would there even be an Earth anymore? Would everything in our part of the universe have already been swallowed up by something else? Who knows? You know, our star will die out, or maybe by chance it gets sucked into a black hole. Like, who knows? Anything could happen. I mean, by that time we'll have merged with the Andromeda Galaxy, but you know, and then that could potentially merge with every other galaxy in the immediate area in galactic terms. But then eventually that super galaxy, which is comprised of us, Andromeda, and other galaxies, will eventually die out itself, which is something we won't even get to see, the death of our own galaxy, because our own galaxy and the universe outlive us to such a degree that we only get to experience a small portion of its lifespan, because our lifespans are so comparatively short. It's really head trippy. Just the vast time scales. Everything that can happen, everything will happen, essentially. I mean, maybe not everything. Maybe there are certain situations that may never come to pass, even with an eternity to work with, just because of what the laws of physics are and what they'll allow. But still, there are going to be states of the universe that we will never get to see, but will happen nonetheless, whether we're here or not. Because the clock keeps on ticking, the universe keeps on going, and that's sort of the way of things. And you know, we'll become dust, we'll merge with the unthinking, unfeeling universe and become one with it. And as I've been starting to say at the end of my videos as a sort of, I don't know, catchphrase, become one.